This is WSFI Spotlight, a conversation with Catholics living in the light.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of WSFI Spotlight. I'm your host, Bill Snyder, and on this very special episode, my guest here today is John Salza. John is a cradle Catholic, and in law school, he was recruited to join the Masons. He is a practicing lawyer in Milwaukee, and he is also a Catholic apologist and author. He has written several books, two of which are Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons and Masonry Unmasked. His website is johnsalza.com. John, thank you so much for joining me here today.
My pleasure, Bill. Thank you for having me.
So, John, I want to ask you right off the bat about your personal journey of faith and your entrance into the Masons. How did this come about?
Yeah, as you said, Bill, I'm a cradle Catholic, and I grew up having a very strong relationship with God, with the Catholic faith. I had a pretty good formation, St. Catherine's of Alexandria and Brown Deer, and then I went on to Dominican high school. So I had 12 years of Catholic education, Mass, Rosary, Confession, Stations of the Cross. I mean, I had a good foundation. Through college and then into law school, I began being recruited, believe it or not, by Catholic men who were Freemasons. And I didn't know much about Freemasonry at all. I knew that they were distinguished by the square and compasses on their temples, as they called them, but that was about it. And when I finally graduated from law school, and Masons want a healthy Catholic representation in their ranks. This is one of their objectives, because they want to deceive the public that this is really a good organization. And plus, being an attorney with some stature, they like people like that in the group. So I was approached, again, by Catholic men out of law school about joining Freemasonry. And I said, what is it about? And they gave me tracts on Freemasonry that shows how many presidents were Masons. These are the lawyers and the judges in town that are Freemasons. And the theme was, hey, this is the most ancient and honorable fraternity in the world, designed to make a good man a better man. And all you have to do is believe in God, and that's it. And that makes you eligible to become a Freemason. Well, that sounds okay. And that doesn't sound like anything nefarious is going on there. But as a Catholic, I still had an inkling that maybe the church had somehow spoken on this matter. And I called my parish priest about it. And he said, you know, the church had spoken negatively in the past, but really today there's a different view. As long as you recognize the distinction between the church and the lodge, it's okay. Now, that's the advice I got. The priest was in good faith. He admitted to me he hadn't studied the matter, and that was really all the research I did. Okay, so I went into Freemasonry, and it was actually in the rituals themselves, learning about the organization, that I discovered that this truly was a religion. It's an anti-Catholic religion, and then began looking at what the popes had said about it in their encyclicals and documents and so forth, and that finally, by God's grace, drew me out of the lodge.
So what is so dangerous, spiritually dangerous, about the Masons? Can you talk about some of those rites and rituals and the dangers of it?
Well, the danger is that Freemasonry leads men away from Jesus Christ and the Catholic Church. That's the bottom line. Freemasonry is a religion, and it's not me saying this. The popes have all said this. In my works, I've discovered over a dozen popes. I've discovered about 24 papal condemnations on Freemasonry, and they all say the same thing. They say that Freemasonry is a religion of naturalism. And that means that it rejects the revealed truth that God has given ultimately in the Son, Jesus Christ, through the Church. So Masonry believes that one can know truth only through their senses, by what is perceived by the senses, through nature, through reason. It rejects all supernatural revelation, okay, as non-essential, as an opinion only. It's not dogmatic. And that's where the Church says, wait a minute, of course we can know God through our senses, through nature, through reason, but God has given us a supernatural revelation that we are obligated to assent to in faith, in supernatural faith. And so that is the inherent conflict between Freemasonry and the faith that our Lord gave us, the Catholic faith.
Why is it such an evil in the world?
Well, again, I'm focusing on the supernatural now. God sent His Son to save us from the fires of hell. He shed His blood on the cross to save us from our sins. And so anything that's going to lead man away from salvation, that is the worst possible danger you can have. And we can talk about the material level and all the evils that Masons have done throughout the world, through their promotion of indifferentism, through their promotion of communism and all these other things. But ultimately, even though the Church recognizes all those things on the material level, it's the spiritual level that's most important, because we're dealing with the salvation of souls. And so Freemasonry has set itself up as a religion directly opposed to the religion of Jesus Christ. And it does this in many ways. You can go downtown here in Milwaukee, you know where the Scottish Rite building is? They built that building right next to the cathedral, St. John's Cathedral. And if you go throughout the country, you will often find that the Masons, the Grand Lodges, or the Scottish Rite buildings are built strategically next to the diocesan cathedrals. Why do they do that? Because they're making a statement. We are at war with the Catholic faith in Jesus Christ. That's why it's a spiritual danger.
Okay, so now can you walk us through some of the particulars of the rites and rituals?
Certainly. I can talk right about the first time you're inducted into Freemasonry. Now, remember I said that they recruit you on the basis of this is an ancient and honorable fraternity, and we want to join. You want you to join so that you can become a good man, better husband and father, and so forth. When you get there, it's interesting. And let me talk first about the process, because this is important. There's an extensive recruiting process that takes place even before you get to the lodge. You have to be unanimously accepted into Freemasonry. And so you are recruited, but you're actually required to ask. There's a bumper sticker on the cars that say to be one, ask one. Okay, that's for the Masons. You have to ask, but it's ironic that they're the ones that are actually asking you. You're not asking them. Okay. So that's the first lie of Freemasonry. They say we don't recruit, and yet they do recruit. And in fact, when I was in the Masons, they were giving financial incentives to recruit as many members as possible. So that's lie number one. The recruiting process is quite extensive. They have Masons come to your place of business, your work, your home, at least 3 separate times. And they ask you a lot of questions about what do you know about Freemasonry? Does your family know anything about Freemasonry? They want to know if there's any internal opposition because they don't want any trouble. They basically want to confirm that you're ignorant about what Masonry is. They also tell you at every meeting, by the way, you have to believe in God, but we don't discuss God in the lodge room. They say that repeatedly. We do not discuss God in the lodge room. Now, I wondered why they were making that disclaimer. You're a fraternity, so why would I expect you to discuss God in the lodge room? Why do you think they say that? They say that to condition you. The conditioning starts already in the recruitment process. That once you get into the lodge, when you hear God being discussed in the lodge room, you're going to hearken back to those representations and say, hey, wait a minute, the brothers told me that God's really not being discussed. So I guess this isn't about God or religion. So that's why they do that. So it's amazing how they've set up this structure. But they start conditioning you right away in recruitment that this isn't about God, and yet all of Freemasonry rituals are about God, their God, the God of Freemasonry. After you go through the interview process, I had to appear before a master's board, which was about a dozen Masons, and there was more interview going on at the lodge. And then finally, they call you a month later and say you've been unanimously accepted. You have to be unanimously accepted to become a member. And so they'll issue you a summons, and you appear for your first degree. And the first degree is called the Entered Apprentice degree. And here is where the ritual starts in earnest. You get to the lodge, and again, remember, you have no idea what to expect. Back then, this is 20 years ago for me now, so they didn't have internet where I could look at what's going on with the rituals. I didn't know anything about this. And you have friends and family, many people waiting in the lodge room. They take you back, and they strip you down, other than your undergarments. And they put you in a very vulnerable position. Now, you're thinking to yourself, why are they doing this? But this is a fraternity, so I guess this is kind of what fraternities do. This is maybe fun and games, but it isn't fun and games because they tell you not just to take off your clothes, they tell you to take off your wedding ring. They tell you to take off your scapular and your crucifix. They divest you of everything. And talk about being put on the spot and not prepared, okay? After 3 months of recruitment and this and that, you're in this situation and you invariably say yes, even though you don't want to say yes. And that was the case with me. You ask why am I required to do this? And they basically say, we'll explain everything to you in the lodge. So you're put in that kind of pressure situation.
Okay. And then what happens?
After you agree to be divested of everything you have, you're blindfolded. Okay, talk about vulnerability. You're blindfolded and a noose is placed around your neck. Now, this happens with every single Mason who's been inducted into Freemasonry. What I'm describing is what happens throughout the world. It's a universal ritual. So you're effectively naked, you're blindfolded with a noose around your neck, and you are escorted to the lodge door, by somebody who's conducting you, your conductor. You can't see anything, okay? All you can do is hear. Mm-hmm. And they ask you to knock on the door 3 times. Okay, so you knock 3 times, and you hear a voice saying, who comes there? And then you hear your conductor responding for you. And he said, this is Mr. John Salza, who has long been in darkness and now seeks to be brought to light. And he goes on to say to receive a right in the parts and benefits of this worshipful lodge. And then you hear erected to God and dedicated to the holy saints John. So I'm thinking to myself, interesting. Saints John, yeah, St. John the Baptist is my patron saint. This sounds okay. This sounds Catholic to me, right? Of course it isn't.
Right.
They're doing this to deceive you. But what's really interesting is they say that the candidate's long been in darkness. Now, what does that mean? I've only had a blindfold on for a couple minutes, but this guy's telling me I'm long in darkness. Well, it means that you are uninitiated. You are still in the darkness of your own religion, your Catholic faith. You haven't been illuminated into the religion of Freemasonry. And so Masons view all non-Masons as what they call profanes. Even if you're baptized in the light of Jesus Christ, a member of his church, to Freemasonry, you're in a state of darkness until you're initiated into the lodge.
Wow, this is an incredible conversation. For those of you listening at home, we're talking with John Salza. He is a former Mason and Catholic apologist and author. We're talking about his personal journey into Freemasonry and his journey of faith. We want to take a short break here on WSFI Catholic Radio and WSFI Spotlight. We do have a small studio audience with us. We will take questions after the break, so stay tuned.
Hello, I'm Scott Hahn from Franciscan University of Steubenville in Ohio. Catholic radio is essential for the new evangelization. It reaches people who are not necessarily going to darken the doorways of a local parish, but they'll be driving by, and you can recommend it. You can even turn it on when you got a passenger in the car. Catholic radio deserves your support as well. Not only your prayer support, but also your financial aid. So I encourage you all, get involved and spread the word. God bless you.
WSFI is committed to bringing quality Catholic programs to our local community, but we only can do that with your financial help. Please take a moment now to donate online at WSFIRadio.org or mail your tax-deductible donation to WSFI Catholic Radio, P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048. That's P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048. Donations of any amount are greatly appreciated.
Are you retired or near retirement? Do you want to keep a larger amount of your assets in a safe place with guaranteed interest rates to protect yourself from a huge market swing? Are you amazed at how low the interest rates are at your bank? If you said yes to any or all of those questions, you may want to call me, Matt Tomlinson, at Catholic Financial Life to discuss our guaranteed fixed-rate annuities. Call 847-548-MATT, 847-548-6288. Products not available in all states.
The Holy Family Catholic Bookstore is blessed with the opportunity to participate with WSFI Catholic Radio in the new evangelization. Holy Family is your local resource for books, CDs, and DVDs from Catholic Answers, Ignatius Press, and all of the other fine publishers featured on Catholic Radio. Holy Family also has the area's largest selection of baptism, communion, and confirmation gifts. Holy Family Catholic Bookstore is located at 9249 Old Green Bay Road, Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. More information is available on Facebook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of WSFI Spotlight. Today, my guest is John Salza. I'm Bill Snyder. We're talking about John's incredible journey into the Masons. He is a former Mason. He is now a Catholic apologist and author. He has authored 2 books on the Masons, Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons, and Masonry Unmasked. The website is johnsalza.com for more information about him. But, John, I want you to continue the story before we get to audience participation and questions here, just about the ritual. You left us off right standing naked, basically, with a noose around your neck before this group of people. So yes. I'll let you continue the story.
And remember, every single Mason goes through what I'm describing. This is the entered apprentice degree. So after you knock on the door, there's a favorable report received, you're escorted into the lodge for the first time. Again, you can't see anything. And immediately, you are received on the point of a sharp instrument piercing your naked left breast. And you are told that as this is an instrument of torture to your flesh, so should the recollection of it be to your conscience, should you ever presume to reveal the secrets of Freemasonry unlawfully. I'm quoting from the ritual. That stuff is still in my mind, what they said to me. You are received. It's a spear or a knife, and it sets the tone immediately. It tells you this really isn't a fraternity. This is more than that. This is something serious. And if you would ever disclose these secrets, you're in danger. Your life's in danger. So they're setting the tone. It's an intimidation tactic, really, is what it is. After that happens, you are asked to kneel down and attend prayer. And you hear who is called the worshipful master. He's the leader of the lodge, the one that's really the head officer of the lodge. He says you're going to kneel in prayer because no Mason engages in any great or important undertaking without first invoking, and I'm quoting, first invoking the blessing of deity. Now, this is the first time you hear God referred to as deity, and immediately as a Catholic it strikes you. That's not how we refer to God. Anyway, they say a prayer together. And after the prayer, all the Masons respond, "So mote it be." This is how they end their prayers, and it's a resounding. If there's 50 or 100 men in that lodge room, you hear, "So mote it be." And it's very intimidating. And at this point, then, it's silent, and the worshipful master places his left hand on your head. You're kneeling down, blindfolded, and he places his left hand on your head, and he says this. He said, "In whom do you put your trust?" And you're not prompted to say anything. And I said, "God." Okay? And he says, "Your trust being in God, your faith is well-founded. Arise, follow your conductor, and fear no danger." Now, this is the problem. If that man confesses a faith in a deity and a false god and the great thumb and Brahma and Vishnu and Shiva and whoever, the worshipful master of the Masonic Lodge is required to tell him, your trust is in God, your faith is well-founded. If that man rejects Jesus Christ, Masons tell him his trust is in God. And so, in other words, Freemasonry lies to that man, lies to him. Because it doesn't matter if you confess Christ. That's the deception here, Bill.
Okay.
If I confess Jesus Christ, okay, fine. But if I say I reject Christ and I worship another God, you're told your trust is still in God. That's the conflict. And so here is where the popes have said that Freemasonry's rituals are contrary not just to revelation but to reason itself. Because if you have two Masons in that situation and one professes a belief in the Trinity and the other one rejects the Trinity, Masonry tells both of them that their trust is in God, which is contrary to reason. It's contrary to the principle of non-contradiction. You can't be and not be at the same time, you see? So this is where the popes have said it's not just contrary to God's revelation, it's contrary to reason itself.
This is amazing testimony and very surprising, I would imagine, to a lot of our listeners and a lot of the people here listening to this. And I want to ask you about after that initiation. How did you feel? How were you received? What was your family? Because you said your family was waiting for you out in the area, right?
Well, we had older friends and some relatives. That's right. Yes.
So was there a celebration after that? Was there what happened after?
You're almost waiting during the ritual, Bill, for somebody to crack a joke or something like this, and that's what is so amazing. This is one of the most solemn things you can see, and I'm using that term not in a religious sense, but it's a very solemn ceremony. I didn't get to the part where you're escorted to the altar. Okay, in the lodge room there is an altar in the center of every lodge room, and it's there where the Mason is required to swear his oath. Okay, it's Masonic Oath, and it's that oath where the ritual says makes a man a Mason, because when he swears the oath, essentially swearing to give his life to Freemasonry, he seals the oath with a blood curse on himself. And what he says in the entered apprentice degree is he says, "I'm worthy to have my throat cut across, my tongue torn out by its roots, and buried in the rough sands of the sea on low water mark, where the tide ebbs and flows twice in 24 hours, etc., etc." All the other rituals are the same. Now, you're swearing this oath on the Holy Scriptures. Because I told him I was a Catholic, when I swore my oath, they had the sacred Bible. They had the Old and New Testament. It was a King James version. It wasn't a Catholic book. I noticed that, but it was still a Bible. Now, if it would be a Muslim, they'd have the Quran. It would be a Book of Mormon. It'd be Mormon, etc. But it's at that point where you asked, what did you feel? What did you see? What happened afterwards? It's that point after you swear the blood oath that your blindfold is taken off. And now you're looking around, and it's dark, and there's candles lit, and you see all the brethren in a line staring at you. They're all dressed in tuxedos and white gloves, and it's very solemn, and nobody's laughing. And then you're instructed further into the rituals of Freemasonry and the concepts and the doctrines and the practices and so forth. After it's all said and done, you're warmly received. You go out for a drink, and they talk about how great Masonry is and how you're now part of a brotherhood that's going to take care of you, and you're going to take care of them.
Wow. Just incredible. Well, do we have any questions from the studio audience that is here?
My question is this. You have gone through this long oath. Now, it's about 12 or 13 paragraphs, something like that, small paragraphs. It isn't until you get to the end that you have this blood-curdling part.
Right.
Are you really saying it, or are you being led through it, or are you just kind of like reciting words at that point? Am I correct in understanding that?
Yes, brother, you are correct. And this is why this is different than some of the pledges that, for example, a Catholic would take in the Knights of Columbus. In the Knights of Columbus, which I also went through, you're read the pledge in advance. That's the first distinction. The second distinction is, in the Pledge of the Knights of Columbus and other types of social organizations, you don't call upon God to witness the promise. That's what makes it an oath. In Freemasonry, you are not told what you are going to recite in advance. You are told, in that very vulnerable position of being blindfolded and naked and a noose around your neck, you will repeat after the worshipful master. Okay, so you simply repeat. And then you're required to call upon God to witness the oath, which makes it an oath, and that just makes it all the more sacrilegious. So that's the distinction.
My question to you is this: is it a financial gain, or is it like a spiritual gain or a business gain by becoming a Mason? What's the purpose in becoming one?
Well, for me, it was business and social. Certainly had nothing to do with religion. I already had my religion, and I would think almost every man that approaches Freemasonry, it's not for religious reasons, although ultimately the effect of it is it draws a man away from his own religion. That's the practical effect that it has. But the pretext is business and social relationships. So look at all the judges that are Freemasons, look at your fellow attorneys, doctors, businessmen, etc. They will give priority to their brethren. Whether you need somebody to fix your car or to mow your lawn or to hear your case, if they're a Freemason, in one of the elements of those oaths is that you swear to be partial to your brother Masons. You swear to be partial to your brother Masons, and that's where the benefits are supposed to come from.
John, just to kind of follow up on that, what is the influence in the law enforcement and the political culture with an oath like that? What happens when they go sit on a judge's seat or in a political setting where we've elected officials to be non-partial, but now you've got this oath?
Well, it creates a conflict of interest because on the one hand, you've sworn to be a partial arbiter in matters legal, for example, as a judge, and on the other hand, you've sworn an oath in the Masonic Lodge to be partial to your brethren. Okay, so if in fact you're presented a case where you believe the evidence weighs in favor of the non-Mason, I have a conflict there because I've already sworn in advance that I'm going to be partial to my brother Mason. That poses a problem.
What happens then? Is there corruption in the system because of Freemasonry? Can we safely assume that?
Well, I think we can. It would require more investigation to actually prove specific facts of certain cases. But, of course, because they've sworn these blood oaths with self-curses, unless people think that those oaths are a joke, in which case they've committed a mortal sin because you're not supposed to call upon God's name to witness a joke, okay? So unless they think those oaths are a joke, then they're going to take those oaths seriously, and you see the internal conflict that one has. I'm either going to disregard the oath, in which case I'm holding it as trivial and I've committed a sin for swearing it in the first place, or I'm going to uphold the oath, but in which case could present a conflict because I'm not actually doing the right thing in real life.
Earlier, John, you in the recruitment and the manner in which you recruited, you helped clarify something that I've always often puzzled about. Why is it so difficult to get Knights of Columbus groups to disassociate themselves from joint fundraising and charitable works with the Masons? And the fact that you speak about recruiting, there are probably some Knights of Columbus members who are also Freemasons, and therefore they will resist breaking this, I would call it, an unnatural bond. Mm-hmm. Your comments, please.
You're absolutely right, brother. The fact of the matter is, while I was in Freemasonry, and right after I left Freemasonry, I should say, and joined the Knights of Columbus, the master of the lodge that I went to was also the counsel for the Knights. He was head of both at the time. I went into the Knights specifically because I knew Father McGivney's objective was to draw men out of Freemasonry to present a social and fraternal setting for Catholic men who shouldn't be in the Masons. I found a very oppressive spirit unfortunately. I was not allowed to talk about the Freemasons, and the reality is there are many high-ranking Masons in the Knights of Columbus at the very top. That's a reality. That is why the Knights of Columbus and the Freemasons gather together very formally, socially. They do it right in here in Milwaukee. The Shriners get together with the Scottish Rite. They have what they call All Faiths Night. That's exactly what they call the meeting down here in Milwaukee. They call it All Faiths Night, with the Scottish Rite or the Shriners get together with the Freemasons at the Scottish Rite. They pray, they dine together, they have fraternal communion, and they act like they're part of the same fraternity.
Can I follow up on that? My own experience has been, on a few occasions I found clear evidence that someone was, from the newspapers, was in the Knights of Columbus and the Masons. And I have reported them to the national headquarters. They will contact his counsel and tell him he must choose one or the other. And they do enforce that. But it seems like they seem to have no ability to break these fundraising bonds and other joint ventures on the national level. They don't seem to know what to do.
Well, since we're on that topic, I'll tell you a true story very quickly. The Knights of Columbus approached me after I left Freemasonry to write for the Veritas series about Freemasons to expose Freemasonry. That's fantastic, because that's one of the things I think the Knights should do. And so I did that. I wrote a pamphlet on Freemasonry. The Knights of Columbus were so pleased with the pamphlet that they actually gratuitously increased my stipend, and they sent it off to Bishop William Laurie in the Diocese of Bridgeport for his imprimatur. So I have an imprimatur from Bishop Laurie, Knights of Columbus. That pamphlet was published and was sent to various Catholic media outlets, including EWTN. One of the interviews that you saw that I did with John at Bankovic, that pamphlet was on the set right next to me. Right before I got to EWTN, they received a call from the Knights of Columbus saying to destroy the pamphlet, to destroy it completely. We do not want it out there. Now, why would that be? As a lawyer, I kept all the rights to that book, and eventually that pamphlet became this book, Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons. So this book was originally written for the Knights of Columbus, for their Veritas series, okay, which received the bishop's imprimatur, and the Knights of Columbus, somebody higher up than the Veritas series, ordered that this be destroyed. EWTN was summoned to turn that book in, to give it back to them, the original, to not make any copies, and this happened in other resources, and I went ahead to TAN Books and published it. So that tells me there's something wrong in that organization.
Just incredible, John. This has been so much fun and inspirational, but not only inspirational, just informative about your journey through the Masons, and certainly enlightening ourselves here and all the listeners we have on WSFI Spotlight. I want to give you the opportunity just to maybe close with some final thoughts here as we wrap up this episode.
Well, hopefully those who are hearing us and have questions about Freemasonry, there's so much information on. I have on my website a tab where I have devoted scores of articles, videos, audio information on Freemasonry. I have published all of the rituals on Freemasonry on my website, so you can read what's there. The rituals are universal. All the rituals that I have there are recognized throughout the United States as universal Freemasonry. And it was a laborious task because the rituals are in the ciphered format. They're not in English, so it took a while for me to do that. So all the information is there. If we would just listen to the popes, listen to the church, listen to those who've gone through this, the information is there to make the right decision. And once people look at what the church says and what this information says, they'll realize it is impossible for a Catholic to be a Mason.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here, John.
Thank you, Bill.
This has been an episode of WSFI Spotlight. Until next time, from all of us here at WSFI Catholic Radio, thank you so much for listening. God bless. I'm Bill Snyder.
This has been WSFI Spotlight. For more information on this or any other program, email info@wsfiradio.org.
This is Father Mitch Pacwa from EWTN Radio in Arndale, Alabama. It is such a great way to learn more about the faith by listening to WSFI 88.5 FM Catholic Radio. You can join us for information about what's going on in Catholic news, ways to understand the faith better, and ways to become evangelists yourself. So please continue to listen to WSFI 88.5 FM Catholic Radio.
WSFI is committed to bringing quality Catholic programs to our local community, but we only can do that with your financial help. Please take a moment now to donate online at WSFIRadio.org. or mail your tax-deductible donation to WSFI Catholic Radio, P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048. That's P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048.
This is WSFI Spotlight, a conversation with Catholics living in the light.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of WSFI Spotlight. I'm Bill Snyder, your host, and today on this episode of WSFI Spotlight, my guest is John Salza. John is a cradle Catholic, and in law school, he was recruited to join the Freemasons. And he is still a practicing lawyer, but he is no longer a Mason. He is now a Catholic apologist and author, and he is author of 2 books, including Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons and Masonry Unmasked. His website is johnsalza.com. John, thank you for being with me again here on this episode of WSFI Spotlight.
Bill, thank you for having me.
So in the first episode, we went through some of the personal journey through the opening initial stages of Masons, but there's so much to uncover on this topic, we have to do 2 episodes. So I want to ask you about the progression of these stages through the Masons.
Yeah, where we left off, Bill, was the man was at the Masonic altar. He's blindfolded with a noose placed around his neck, and he's required to swear the Masonic Oath and seal it with a blood curse, a self-curse, effectively saying he's worthy of mutilation and death if he would ever violate his Masonic obligation. At that point, he is what is called brought to light. And the worshipful master, who is the principal officer of the lodge, goes through Scripture. Again, this is why it's so deceptive. You hear the Scriptures read frequently throughout rituals. He says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And God said, let there be light, and there is light. And at that point, the Mason's blindfold, which they call a hoodwinked, is removed. And he sees his brothers in the lodge, usually dressed in suits or tuxedos, and he is educated about the doctrines of Freemasonry. One of the first things he learns, and one of the first things he actually sees, is that his hands are placed on the Holy Scriptures where he swore his oath, and he sees the square and compasses on the Scriptures, which are symbols of Freemasonry. Well, what that really means is that just as the square and compass symbolize certain moral principles in Freemasonry, sure, Masonry also holds the book, the Bible, as only a symbol. And notice that the Masonic symbols are on top of the Scriptures. So it's effectively communicating to the man that really isn't the Word of God. It's just a symbol of Masonic principles, however you want to interpret them for yourself. Now, after that happens, the doctrine kind of ramps up because you've first heard about prayers to deity, you've taken a blood oath, you've learned that the Scriptures are symbolic. Next, and I'm cutting out parts, but the most important parts is the man is presented his Masonic apron. Now, people are familiar with the white aprons that Masons wear, and again, this is in the first degree, the entered apprentice degree. The man is presented his entered apprentice apron, and he's told, quote, the apron symbolizes, and I'm quoting, the purity of life and conduct which is essentially necessary to your gaining admission into the celestial lodge above where the supreme architect of the universe presides. Now, that comes from the rituals. Now, what it's telling you is Masonry has doctrines not just about God, but about salvation, about redemption. It's telling the man that if you live a life of Masonic virtue, a spotless life, which the white apron represents, you're going to heaven. And by the way, it doesn't matter if you believe in Jesus Christ or are a member of his church. As long as you're a good Mason, you're going to heaven. So you see, this is where the conditioning process starts in. Funny names for God, symbols for heaven, doctrines about heaven, and so forth. That's where it crosses the line. Very briefly, and this theme continues in the next 2 degrees. In the next degree, the fellowcraft degree, the Mason is required to bow in unison with his brothers to that letter G that hangs in the eastern quadrant of the lodge. That letter G symbolizes the God of Freemasonry. And in English-speaking lodges, the letter G is used because it's for God, but also geometry. Remember, we talked about Masonry being a religion of naturalism. Masonry believes that one can know truths about God only through reason and through the senses, what they say the geometrical perfection of the universe. So that letter G represents the God of Freemasonry. How do you know about the God of Freemasonry? Through your senses, through the geometrical perfection of the universe. Finally, I want to mention the 3rd degree. This is where it crossed the line for me and where I knew that there was really I had to get out. Doctrinally was what the problem was. The third degree, unlike the first two degrees, where there also is an oath and there's teachings about morals and doctrine and salvation, in the third degree of Freemasonry, another rite, and it's a death, burial, and resurrection rite. In this rite, and I know people can't believe when I tell them that what goes on here, but the Mason is caused to play someone named Hiram Abiff. Now, he's a scriptural character. He worked on King Solomon's temple, but the Masons admit there's no historical, this is not an historical story. This is simply something that they made up. The long story short is the Mason is symbolically murdered in the lodge and raised to life. So even though you've sworn your oath, a blindfold is put on you again, okay? You're escorted around the lodge. You're accosted by three Masons, Jubilah, Jubilo, and Jubilum. They're demanding of you the secrets of a master Mason. This is all part of the story. And then it leads up to them actually killing you. And what literally happens in the Masonic Lodge is while you're blindfolded, you're hit over the head with a padded setting maul, it's called. It's a large hammer, and this is what really happens. I was hit over the head. I was knocked off my feet, all 175 pounds of me at the time. I was knocked off my feet, and I was caught in a large sack by the brothers. And now this is something that just takes you by complete surprise. You have no idea what this is about. You're told to lie down. You stay down there. This is all part of it. You're buried then. All these wood scraps were put all over me, okay? And again, there's a lot more that goes on to the lodge, but to cut to the end, you're reinterred. The Masons discover the grave. King Solomon sends a search party. They gather around the grave. The blindfold's taken off. You're laying on your back. You're seeing all the Masons above you. And they first make what's called a Masonic hailing sign of distress, which is, "O Lord, my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" A prayer of salvation is saved, and then the man is raised up, he says, from a dead level to a living perpendicular. And then after that, they tell you that this exemplifies Masonry's belief in the doctrine of the resurrection of the body and the immortality of the soul. Now, does that sound like a fraternity to you, or does it sound like a religion? It's a religion. It's a religious cult. And the deception is resurrection of the body is an article of the Catholic faith. Well, I can try to rationalize that this is Catholic, but if you go back to the first degree ritual, which says, "In who do you put your trust?" It doesn't matter what faith you have. It doesn't matter what God you believe in. Masonry is imprinting upon you its own religious beliefs, the doctrine, the Masonic doctrine of bodily resurrection. One last point on that. I didn't know this, and I've never seen this written anywhere, but in my personal studies, when I went back and looked at that ritual and meditated upon it, I mentioned this grand hailing sign of distress, which is what they make right before they raise the candidate up. Mm-hmm. It says, "O Lord my God," this is universal, "O Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" Now, what does that mean? I've concluded that that means, is there no help for the widow's son? Who's the widow? The widow is Our Lady. The Son is our Lord Jesus Christ. It is a mockery and satanic parody of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ himself. So they're saying, "Oh Lord my God, is there no help for the widow's son?" In other words, Christ is a fraud. He's not the real resurrection. Masonry has the real truth. Then they raise the candidate up and say, this testifies to Masonry's belief in the resurrection of the body and the immortality of the soul. Now, of course, if somebody would have told me that going in, I would have never, of course, ever joined. But even Catholic men have not comprehended the full significance of this. They simply rationalize it by saying, that sounds like a Catholic doctrine to me, and that's good enough. It's not. It's anti-Catholic.
And I just want to draw on this point. Many men maybe feel uncatechized enough to fall deceptive to this. What were some of the things that the bells and whistles that went off maybe from your being a practicing Catholic your whole life? Did that help you in discerning that? And was there something that just went, oh my gosh, this can't be right?
There's no question it helped discerning it. I mean, remember, I was Catholic going in, right. And just as a personal aside, I don't like making this personal, but I will say this. I began praying the rosary as a Mason daily, so I've been doing it now for 20-plus years. And I was begging Our Lady, actually, during my time as a Freemason to help me discern if this was right. Because the very first day of that moment of my initiation, when they told me to take off my crucifix and my wedding ring, and they put a spear in my chest, and they told me that we're going to pray to deity, and they told me that the white apron represented what I needed to do to get eternal life. all that hits you in one night. You go back home, and I was laying on my bed trying to fall asleep, reeling about what did I just hear? It just happened so fast. What did I hear? Mm-hmm. So I began praying the rosary to Our Lady, immediately turning to her, and of course she's the one that led me out, that helped me discern the evils behind these things.
Incredible. And so obviously you encourage Catholic men and all people by really reflecting on their faith and deepening their own faith. They can get out of this. We live in a society right now where we're imbued with these principles of indifferentism, that it doesn't really matter what you believe as long as you're a good person. That's the problem, because that is what the culture tells us. Just be a good person. It doesn't matter what you believe. Well, the shed blood of Jesus Christ is the only way we get to heaven. Our Lord said, nobody comes to the Father but by me. Now, that sounds unpolitically correct, and that's right, it is, but that's the truth. And so for those who are living in an environment where it's just be a good person, not going to judge you, you don't judge me, they really can fall prey to these principles. That feeds right into what society's living to this day. How much of an intolerant are you to say, well, there's no salvation outside of Christ in the Catholic Church, right? I mean, right. You say that, you're looked upon as somebody that's not with it. Right, and these principles are perpetuated by the Masons, right? So they're not only taking prey to people who are weak in this area of catechesis, but then what they're doing is they're also promoting the culture to continue that further, correct? Yes, and what happens is Masonry then becomes their substitute religion, because if they're indifferent to begin with, and they start getting involved in the rituals of Freemasonry, that becomes their religion, because they say, well, I'm really doing something extra. I'm doing something special. I'm no longer indifferent. I'm actually pleasing God through my practice and participation in Freemasonry, and it has just the opposite effect. Because while Masonry tells you that you can believe whatever you want, the Church says no. Christ gave us his revelation. You come to the Father only through him. Well, we do have to take a short break here on WSFI Spotlight. You are listening to the voice of John Salza. He is a Catholic apologist and author. He has authored 2 books on the Masons, Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons, and Masonry Unmasked. It is a wonderful conversation. We're going to continue our conversation right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, my name is Mother Mary David. I'm a Sister of Charity of Our Lady Mother of the Church from Baltic, Connecticut. I think Catholic radio is really important in the world today because it offers an opportunity to bring God's message to a world that really is starving for that message. So many people are taken up with so many things that are materialistic, and the hunger in their soul is left empty. Catholic radio helps to satisfy that hunger.
WSFI is committed to bringing quality Catholic programs to our local community, but we only can do that with your financial help. Please take a moment now to donate online at WSFIRadio.org or mail your tax-deductible donation to WSFI Catholic Radio, P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois, 60048. That's P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois, 60048. Donations of any amount are greatly appreciated.
Are you retired or near retirement? Do you want to keep a larger amount of your assets in a safe place with guaranteed interest rates to protect yourself from a huge market swing? Are you amazed at how low the interest rates are at your bank? If you said yes to any or all of those questions, you may want to call me, Matt Tomlinson, at Catholic Financial Life to discuss our guaranteed fixed-rate annuities. Call 847-548-MATT, 847-548-6288. Products not available in all states.
The Holy Family Catholic Bookstore is blessed with the opportunity to participate with WSFI Catholic Radio in the new evangelization. Holy Family is your local resource for books, CDs, and DVDs from Catholic Answers, Ignatius Press, and all of the other fine publishers featured on Catholic Radio. Holy Family also has the area's largest selection of baptism, communion, and confirmation gifts. Holy Family Catholic Bookstore is located at 9249 Old Green Bay Road, Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. More information is available on Facebook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of WSFI Spotlight. I'm Bill Snyder. Today, my guest is John Salza. He is a Catholic author and apologist and a former Mason, talking about his journey through the Masons. And you left us off with this third rite of Masonry. So I want to just finish off the story and tell me a little bit about the last 2 or 3 portions of this.
Sure. So after a man becomes a Master Mason, and remember that culminates in the death, burial, and resurrection rite of the Hiramic legend, it's called, of the third degree, he is now a full-fledged Master Mason. And Masons say that that's the highest as you can go. However, there are degrees numerically higher than the third degree. A man at that point has the option of either joining what's called the York Rite or the Scottish Rite. It's most common in the northern jurisdiction here, where we are in the United States, to join the Scottish Rite. And the Scottish Rite confers the 4th through the 32nd degree. They have an extremely elaborate temple here in Milwaukee. They do this throughout the country. And there is a class, usually maybe 15 to 20 men, that will be inducted to receive their 32nd degree. When I went through, it was typically a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, where you either would witness or participate in all the rituals. So it is a weekend program. You either sit in an arena-like setting and watch the Masons conferring the degrees upon each other, or sometimes participate in those. I can tell you that there was some very, very interesting rituals that I witnessed, and this continued me to further investigate and ultimately leave the lodge. One of the degrees, they came out with hosts and wine, and they say we're sealing our Masonic covenant around the altar. Now again, as a Catholic, you're saying, wow, is this a mockery of the Eucharist? Well, of course it is. Okay, all this led to my absolute, utter, ultimate rejection of it. Sure. But again, talk about fraternity that's actually having a communion service in its rituals. After the Scottish Rite, then, sometimes a man goes up and joins the shrine. Okay, now the proper title for the shrine is the Ancient Arabic Order Nobles of the Mystic Shrine, AANMOS. In shrine ritual, they bring those letters out, and they rearrange them on the stage, and when you rearrange those letters, it says A Mason. So the fundamental bond of all Shriners is that they're Master Masons. They all have to be Master Masons, okay? And they emphasize that this is a Masonic organization. In fact, in the shrine, we talked about the oaths that one must swear, and in the Scottish Rite, every degree has an oath and a similar symbolic blood-curdling penalty. In the shrine, in my experience, and this is, again, throughout North America, they brought out the Quran. And you're actually required to swear the oath on the Quran. And you swear that in that particular penalty, you swore that you would be worthy to have your eyeballs slit with a 3-inch blade and your feet flayed and walk on the hot sands of the sea. That's what all Shriners swear on the Quran or on the Bible, as the case may be. Now, you're wondering why they use the Quran. Are they making fun of the Quran? Because that really wouldn't be Masonic, would it, to make fun of another religion? No. They're simply saying that just like the Bible, the Quran is just another symbol. It's whatever you want it to be. It's not whatever you want to believe is your own truth. It's indifferentism. And so you have the 3 degrees, you have the Scottish Rite or the York Rite, and then you have the shrine. Now the shrine is very deceptive because they appear to do a lot of good for the community. They have the shrine circus parades, they wear the red fezzes, they sell the onions at Kmart and all this and that, but they're all high-ranking Masons. They're all bonded into this blood-curdling covenant of Freemasonry, and that's why the Church has also condemned all those bodies. The Church calls them the auxiliary bodies of Freemasonry, also come under the Church's condemnation.
Excellent. This is so enlightening and incredible. I want to ask you just about you mentioned toward the end there just about the Scottish Rite the Masons will do with the fezzes and all. They run these hospitals, they sponsor these hospitals, as you were saying off the air. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and what somebody does when they're looking for a hospital?
Well, they sponsor them. I mean, they pay a fee to the hospitals to put their names on it, but they're not running the hospitals, and the money that goes to the shrine doesn't go to the hospitals, okay? That's a facade. No one's arguing that a non-Catholic can't do some natural good in the world, okay? And so Freemasons, just like Mormons, just like Muslims, just like Hindus and everybody else, they can do some natural good. Nobody's disputing that. But the fact of the matter is that's a sponsorship that has drawn a lot of people to the Shriners because they think that it's doing such good for the community, and the reality is it's nothing more than a sponsorship. Okay. And that's not relevant to the fact that in their rituals they deny the exclusive claims of Jesus Christ in the Catholic Church. I mean, that's a fact. And it's not me just saying this. People have publicly documented the fact that the Shriners are their own biggest charity. In my books I've cited articles that have revealed that 98% of the money that goes to the shrine goes to their lodges, their costumes, their alcohol, their meeting halls, and everything else. And so it's a facade, is what it is.
So somebody donating to a hospital directly may be okay, but not someone directly donating to the Shriners.
If you're going to support the hospitals, donate to the hospitals directly, yes.
Excellent. I want to maybe shift focus a little bit and talk about Masonry in the church, or if it's possible that there is some infiltration into the church with this, and what are some of the results of that?
Well, I certainly believe, because Our Lady has warned of this, that Masons have infiltrated the church. She appeared at Quito, Ecuador in the end of the 17th and beginning of the 18th century, and she said that Masonry would penetrate the church in the middle of the 20th century. Okay, and that's really where the crisis started after Vatican II, where we had a lot of confusion about whether the church was actually changing the way she was teaching or she was just changing the expression of the teaching. But that's what Our Lady warned about. And the church has been very clear. This is what's so beautiful about the church. God's not going to let the church ever bind Catholics to error. So even if one can say that Masons have infiltrated the church and have tried to change things within the church, the official teachings of the Catholic Church have always remained the same. I mentioned all of these papal condemnations. Well, the latest one came under the pontificate of John Paul II, which was actually authored by Cardinal Ratzinger, and it's called the Declaration Against Masonic Associations. I think it was November 26th of 1983 it was released. And in that document, the Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger, future Pope, said that anyone who joins a Masonic association is in a state of grave sin and cannot receive Holy Communion. Now, that means mortal sin, because you cannot receive Holy Communion if you're in mortal sin. Now, the Church rarely goes that far. I mean, this was a document issued by the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith warning Catholics that objectively, if you are a member of a Masonic association, you cannot receive Holy Communion. You're cut off from the life of grace in the church. And that means that you're not part of the church, because it's a sin against the faith. So that is and always has been and always will be the official teaching of the Catholic Church.
I want to ask you about the associations with church organizations. For instance, Knights of Columbus maybe having a fish fry or something social with the Masons. Is that, in your opinion, permissible according to church teaching? Should it be done? How do we put an end to that?
Well, it's a scandal that should not be done at all. And when the popes have spoken about Freemasonry, I'm talking about Leo XIII and Pius IX and on and on and on, they said that one cannot have any association with Freemasonry. That doesn't mean just joining its lodge and going through its rituals and reciting its oath. It means any association whatsoever. And that's because of the scandal that it brings. It leads souls to believe that Masons are good and upstanding and that Catholics can join them. And that's why those associations have to be prohibited.
There might be some listeners out there that are Catholics and Masons. What do they do about it?
Well, we have to speak out against it, and unfortunately, a lot of this is a result of the ignorance of Catholics who have had poor formation, who don't see what the Church has said, and who are deceived by the secular world. And we're trying to do our part to correct that, but that's the problem. And we can actually point to the bishops and the priests who aren't talking about these things from the pulpit, unfortunately. Why? Because they've been imbued in this Masonic philosophy over the last 50 years. And so it requires knowledge, right? I mean, faith is an act of the intellect, of the truths that God has revealed. It starts there. It starts with our knowledge and with our faith. And we need to then communicate that faith publicly by showing what the Church teaches. And now, I mean, with modern means of communication, we have all the information that we need. We can watch the rituals on YouTube. We can read the rituals on websites like mine, and then we can look what the Church says, and there's the answer.
Yes. So specifically, maybe there's actually somebody listening right now that wants to get out of Masonry, that's a Catholic. How do they renounce that?
In the sacrament of confession. That is sufficient. They go to the sacrament of confession. They're absolved of their sin. They have to say that they've sworn the oath. They have to say that they've sworn this blood curse, and that should be sufficient. It's good if they'd have a spiritual director, because a lot of times men suffer certain spiritual maladies from these oaths. There's a lot of oppression. Demonic spirits, if you're ready to renounce Freemasonry, get ready for a battle. You are going to be in a battle, because the devil doesn't want you to renounce Freemasonry, because he's got you at that point. Mm-hmm. So it is the sacrament of confession. What I did and what I would recommend also, though, is that they write a letter to the lodge explaining why you're leaving. And why is that? Because at least under the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin laws, I knew that that letter had to be read in open lodge. And in most lodges, they have to read the letter of resignation. So you know what? You want to stage there. You want to tell them exactly, make it short and sweet. I have a sample resignation letter in here, which is similar to what I used, although I kind of wrote a tome. I don't think they read all of mine. But that's what I would do. Sacrament of confession, write a letter to the worshipful master, have it read in open lodge. And you know what? The brothers who are in that lodge, if they hear that, they might say, you know what, I'm having the same type of struggle. I'm having the same struggle.
John, this has been so much fun and informative and just inspiring here, listening to you talk and really just be able to enlighten all people about the dangers and the spiritual issues that are with the Masons and all kinds of things. I want to ask if we have a few minutes left for questions. We do have a studio audience here, so are there any questions for John?
Thank you, John. I'm wondering, how prevalent is this? Is this a big issue or a little issue in our culture? Is it 1 out of every 20 million people that are Masons, or is it something bigger than that?
My personal opinion, and people may be upset about this, my personal opinion is there's more Masons in the Vatican than there are outside the Vatican in the Catholic Church. I would say that it is a problem because Masonry, even though numbers have been going down, they continue to attract Catholic men. They continue to try to get Catholic representation in their ranks. And so it is a big problem. And in fact, it's a problem also for them, too, because the numbers have gone down. That's why they were giving financial incentives to recruit men when I was involved. But that's why shows like this are so important. Who's ever listening to this, the information is there. The information is there for the public.
Exactly. Any other questions?
Thank you again. What was the turning point in your life to make you want to really get out? And were there any consequences, like business-wise or physical or anything like that?
Well, the turning point started the moment I entered into the Masonic Lodge and I was received on that sharp knife and heard deity and salvation and doctrines. That's really when I started to turn right away. Couldn't turn the full 180, though. It took me a while. But it was, I think, the doctrine of the resurrection of the body. When I went through that and went back to the ritual and actually saw the words resurrection of the body, it was a very simple formula for me. A, Masonry believes in resurrection of the body, but B, Masonry doesn't believe in Jesus Christ. So right there it's an incompatibility, and that was sufficient for me to say, hey, ultimately, doctrinally, that's where I had to leave the lodge. Yes, there's been threats, there's been actions. I still continue to suffer, and I don't care to go into the particulars, but at the same time, I know that this is the right thing to do.
Absolutely. John, thank you so much for spending some quality time here with us on WSFI Catholic Radio. This has just been such an inspiration talking to you and an important conversation for faithful Catholics living out in the world to know about this evil, to know about this danger. And thank you for all you're doing to spread the word and expose this great evil.
Thank you so much, Bill, for having me.
Just want to give you the books and the website one more time. Why Catholics Cannot Be Masons and Masonry Unmasked. John's website is simple, johnsalza.com, JOHNSALZA.com. We encourage listeners to visit for more information. There is certainly much more than an hour worth of content to discuss this very important topic. We encourage you to listen, to read, and to always fight the good fight. Thank you once again to John. I'm Bill Snyder. This has been an episode of WSFI Spotlight. Until next time, from all of us here, thank you so much, and God bless.
This has been WSFI Spotlight. For more information on this or any other program, email info@wsfiradio.org.
Hi, I'm Doug Barry from Life on the Rock. The importance of Catholic radio cannot be underestimated. This is a medium that can reach into the hearts and the minds and the vehicles of individuals at any given time or day. This is one of those ways that we can reach hearts and souls that are hurting and that need to know the grace, the strength, the healing power of Christ.
WSFI is committed to bringing quality Catholic programs to our local community, but we only can do that with your financial help. Please take a moment now to donate online at WSFIRadio.org or mail your tax-deductible donation to WSFI Catholic Radio, P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048. That's P.O. Box 885, Libertyville, Illinois 60048. Donations of any amount are greatly appreciated. Oh my God,
I firmly believe that you are one in 3 divine persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. I believe that your divine Son became man and died for our sins, and that he shall come to judge the living and the dead. I believe these and all the truths that the Holy Catholic Church teaches, because you have revealed them, who can neither deceive nor be deceived.
This is Joe Scheidler, the National Director of the Pro-Life Action League, headquartered in Chicago. I'm asking you to please to pray today for every woman facing a problem pregnancy that she will not choose a